Okay, welcome everybody. I'm watching the participant numbers go up. We're going to wait just a second until we get everybody in the room, and then we're going to get started with today's session. This is our second session that we're doing with courtesy of the generosity of Bank of America, which is transitioning into finance. So let's give it a few more minutes to get a few more seconds to get everybody on as they're coming into the webinar. Watching the numbers go up. I'm also waiting for the 12 o'clock whistle to end out here in Montauk. Apparently they believe we can't tell time out here, so they blow a big whistle at noon. So as soon as that whistle subsides, we'll get going.
Wow, that's a great tradition.
Is that for the fire department or something along those lines?
Yeah, the fire department blows the whistle, but I guess they feel that we can't tell time. I don't know. But at noon every day the whistle goes off, and I think we have one at 6 o'clock. I've become immune. But anyway, we've got a lot of people here today. Thank you so much for coming today to Friday to our discussion on transitioning into finance. So we have here three fabulous Columbia graduates, alumni, and they're going to talk a little bit about their journey to banking. Each of them have done something really unique before business school, and can give you some tips on what's sort of they were thinking when they were in your seat and what you might be thinking. So instead of sort of just merely hearing what's going on in the marketplace and oh yes, we're hiring and all that stuff, here are three live people who can tell you exactly what's going on. That being said, we're largely going to chat for a little bit. The panelists will introduce themselves after I go through a couple of introductory slides, tell you a little bit about their background. I'll ask a few softball questions, and then we're going to turn it over to you guys to continue to ask questions. I'll monitor the chat when we go to that, and you'll be able to ask questions generally or ask them to a particular panelist. Just put it in the chat. But this is a program for you. Our professionals here came and graciously gave of their time, and they're super busy trying to do a whole bunch of different things, and they'll talk to you about what's going on in the marketplace. So if we don't have enough questions, we're not going to fill the airtime to get to 1 o'clock. So once we go through the introductions and some sort of basic table setting questions, we're going to turn it over to you, our esteemed audience. All right, Greta, you want to talk about any of the technical things that we have to worry about?
Hi, everybody. So this is just here. We're not using the Q&A function, so just use the chat, this red box here. Donna and I and the panelists will all see our questions come in. And so we'll, we'll kind of look at themes and make sure everything is covered. Oh, and here's Donna's bio.
Yes, so here
Donna,
I am, the
back to you.
moderator. Yeah, many of you know me as the director of the private equity program. I'm also a faculty leader at Sanford Bernstein. Happy to be working at Columbia, been here for a really long time, also a proud Columbia graduate. I'm a graduate of the class of 1990. I started out life as a lawyer at Skadden, and then I was there about 3 years and then came to Columbia Business School, got my MBA, and then spent a career in investment banking at the First Boston Corporation for many years, also JP Morgan, and a small amount of time, believe it or not, at B of A. So I know some of the panelists, some of the folks that they work with. And interesting fun fact, one of the very senior people at Bank of America used to be my TA when I first came here, teaching assistant when I first came here, and taught tax. So we'll go to the next slide. Here are our panelists today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but you can see we have Graham Fadden, Tara Kurian, and Towson Remmel. They have very different areas of the bank, and they have very different trajectories into getting into investment banking. Next slide. And please follow us on the private equity program. We list many events that we happen there. We try to email everybody, all of the people that we think would be interested in a particular event, but you can always see what's happening on a regular basis by checking us out at the private equity website. Okay, and again, we want to thank Bank of America and Sherry in particular, who was very instrumental in organizing this, both providing us with some financial support here at Columbia Business School for the private equity program, as well as finding speakers for us. So we're very grateful for that. And if you have any questions after the program, you can reach Sherry. So you might want to take a picture of this slide because it has Sherry's email address in the lower right-hand corner. Okay, and I also just want to remind you again before we conclude today, that on Friday, December 4th, we will have another panel. It'll be our last in the series with Bank of America, and it will be on Friday, December 4th at noon. All these are all at noon, and we'll talk about growth equity. Okay, I think that does it. I think we can now go right to the panelists and questions. So let me see. So why don't we start with you, Towson? Do you want to give us a little bit of your background, how you got here, and how you ended up at B of A?
Sure. Thanks, Donna. So, and actually, I think all of us, I remember taking Donna's class. I guess that would have been 4.5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great to be back. I graduated from Princeton, and actually, after I graduated, I worked in real estate in Eastern Europe for a period of time, which was pretty fascinating. I actually heard Donald Trump Jr. Speak at a few conferences there, strangely enough. Came back to New York City, worked to co-found a fund focused on new ETFs called Syntax. And then actually my boss had been from CBS and had from CBS gone on to do a big career in investment banking. And from there, he'd done his kind of own entrepreneurial ventures. So I decided I'd like to go to CBS, kind of follow a little bit in his footsteps. Looked at investment banking from when I started. And actually, for me, it was interesting. I started at one of the boutique investment banks. Summered there, then was there for 3 years. And so what was interesting is the first year was a generalist program. I actually thought maybe I'd go into restructuring, but energy and power was a great fit for me, both the sector, kind of a lot of the technical and specifics of the industry and the team. So I ended up there, and then had a great experience. But what really kind of drew me to B of A is simply the deal flow that we have in this sector is really just unbelievable, and also just so many deals focused on the tech side of the space, on renewables, new emerging technologies, which is really very exciting. And so I've been at B of A about 15 months now, kind of really enjoying it, and had kind of a really kind of wide range of opportunities across the space, from water and wastewater utilities, electric and gas utilities, to new recycling technologies, really kind of across the gamut to tax equity, and really kind of enjoying my time. So thanks, Donna. I guess let me pass it over to Graham.
Yeah, we'll pass it to Graham, and then we'll go to Tara.
Awesome. Thank you both. So I am a Columbia 2017 graduate, but before business school, I was an infantry officer in the Marine Corps. Spent I guess 2 deployments to Afghanistan, one to the Republic of Georgia. I took the GMAT while I was in Georgia, and then applied to business school on my last deployment. So I transitioned out of the Marines knowing I was going to business school, but not quite sure what the next step would be. I think my MBA essays were something about consulting or something like that. But I think soon after stepping onto campus, I realized I guess the analytical rigor of investment banking was my weakest point. So starting my career off in investment banking, I guess was able to allow me to address that weak point. I'm now a 3rd-year associate in the real estate gaming and lodging group. I didn't intern with this bank. I actually spent my summer in London. I thought the one thing I could continue doing from the Marine Corps was working internationally. Unfortunately, that was the summer of the Brexit vote, so I came home realizing I had to rethink that idea. But fortunately, I got to know the real estate team here at B of A well during the initial recruiting cycle. I was able to find a full-time role. Again, 3rd-year associate, we really work on the full spectrum of real estate, gaming, and lodging companies. So you can think through all of your real estate asset classes, but also cruise ships. I cover both of our ski resort names, Vail being the public operator, and then Altera being a private name owned by KSL. Now we're working on a SPAC with a prop tech thesis. So really the full spectrum again of real estate, gaming, and lodging. I think what surprised me most about investment banking is, despite the reputation of long hours, intense analytical work, very quickly I was given on the job. Once I kind of got my feet wet and understood how kind of these things work, would be on the phone with a client. Let's say we were refinancing their capital stack, and I was the point contact, walking through a lender presentation or their projection model and diligencing the business. And I was the point person working, at times twice a day, even with their corporate development team. And that was just an Untitled Inspire spec. I can say I was the one managing the lawyers, making sure deadlines were met on different drafts, coordinating bi-weekly calls to make sure the process was moving. And in hindsight, I don't think I'd get that kind of, responsibility at such a young point in my career. If you think through all the ranks of the investment bank, associates, VPs, directors, managing directors, group heads, global heads, everything else, it's kind of, you don't really know when you'll fit in, but I think again, when I've received just in a very short amount of time at B of A. And Donna, thank you for that.
Well, thanks, Graham. Thanks, Graham. So we're going to turn, we're going to turn over to Tara. You want to give us a little bio there, Tara?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. Hi, everyone. My name is Tara Curry, and I'm a first-year director in consumer retail. My background, I came from consulting. And so I was an engineer from undergrad, decided to do consulting for about 4 years. And then the way that I approached the career switch was much more, I wanted to try investment banking. I thought if there was anything else that I wanted to do outside of consulting, what might that be? And I used my summer as an opportunity to explore. And I guess what you could say is the rest is history. So I worked at B of A in the consumer and retail group for my summer and really, really liked it. Just found the pace of activity, the types of conversations we have with clients. I actually got to go on a road show for a lender present. We were doing a debt offering, and I went on the road with the company and the CEO and the CFO, and I just found that so invigorating. And I just had a level of, I don't know what the right word is, excitement. It was just fascinating to be able to walk around with the CEO and the CFO and let them explain their story to debt investors. And I just thought, this is cool. This is, you don't get this in consulting at this young, kind of, to Graham's point, like early on, you get exposure to very senior people within the industry and within organizations that you otherwise wouldn't have. So I came back full time in 2013 and have been mostly aligned with retail, but I have done a bit more of the consumer landscape. This year as a director, I'm the chief resource officer. So you'll hear from other banks the staffer role, and that's what I'm doing for this year, which when I took over the role in January, I don't know that anybody could have predicted we'd be managing staffing completely remotely while people are mostly all work from home during a global pandemic. So that's been an interesting, I don't even know how to add that to the resume, staffer during global pandemic. But it's definitely giving me a different type of leadership opportunity within the firm as we all try to manage this, mental health as we're all working from home and all trying to maintain some level of sanity as we navigate this all together. But yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I'm happy to answer any questions about transitioning from consulting into banking, or I can talk a little bit more about consumer retail. Deal flow is up like year over year, like we are incredibly active. And so it's never a dull moment. I'll just leave it at that.
Tara, I wanted to ask you a question, and then we'll have a couple other questions, and then we'll open it up because we've got quite a few in the chat already. I was very heartened to hear that you were made the staffer, because that was always sort of, at least in the banks that I worked at, a very, I wouldn't say coveted position because it's a really hard job, but it sort of indicated you were on a path to more things, better things at the bank. It was really sort of training you in a leadership role. And how is it for women in banking now? I mean, when I was in banking, we never had any women staffers in any of the places that I worked at. So how would you say, has it changed? I mean, because 2013, it sounds like yesterday, but it is, when you think about it, it's 7 years ago. So,
Yep.
We're all talking about how people are looking for more diverse candidates, and your colleague Joe Messina was here last time, and he talked about that. But can you testify to some of that as actually being real, as opposed to sort of, okay, great, now we have two as opposed to one?
Yeah, no, I think that the firm, like B of A specifically, is incredibly focused on diversity. And I was lucky, consumer retail, I would say, is more heavily focused, or not heavily focused, but we just happen to have more women within the group. And we, for 7 years. So I joined in 2013. Lisa Clyde took over the group, I think in 2013, and she just handed over the reins. She got a promotion within the firm, and it was very sad to see her go because we had this very senior woman on Wall Street, very well known, amazing banker, very good role model to look up to. Just her overall intelligence, like just how she interacted with clients was fascinating. And to have her promoted was an amazing opportunity to see just for women, right? She now runs the entire global corporate bank. But we did lose a senior woman. So that was sad from that end. But Donna, to your point, I have watched the industry definitely evolve, because when I started in 2013, there was no Saturday protections. There was no, let's check in on the mental health of our juniors. There was none of that. It was more like, you good? All right, well, here's another staffing, just keep on going. I mean, and you get addicted to that pace. But we've definitely evolved since then, and we're putting practices into place to make sure that people take their vacations, to make sure that they get the Saturday off, to have 1 day of rest during the week, to make sure that if they did work 100 plus hours, they get a mandatory day off, that kind of thing, to just rest and recuperate and recover. And I have seen the industry evolve from that end. But to your point on the women specifically, I think the bank has done a very good job of keeping women within the firm and giving them leadership opportunities to continue to grow, not just within investment banking, or within consumer retail, but also within investment banking.
That's great. No, that's good to hear, because I mean, it's good to hear it from somebody who's actually seen it, as opposed to people saying, well, now we've got religion and we're ready to go. I mean, if you've actually seen the evolution, and I can say I have seen the evolution, wasn't so much it was kind of like when I was there, it was the dinosaur age. It was kind of glacial pace that was moving, but now it's, I think, moving a lot more quickly, and people do realize the importance of having a diverse group, partially driven, I would say, by the enlightenment of the firms, but in no small part driven by the clients' insistence upon that. I think, right, you go to clients now and they want to make sure that they have a diverse team. I was reading something in the Wall Street Journal about lawyers, and a lot of clients are insisting that their legal team now be a diverse team. So that's good to hear. So I'm just going to go around the horn. I'll start with Ramel Towson there, and then I'll go to Graham, and then I'll come back to you, Tara. I just have 3 quick questions, and then we'll open it up. And so the first question is going to be, what best prepared you for, and you might not have known it at the time, but looking back, what best prepared you at CBS for where you are now, or for your job search in general? Maybe you didn't know exactly where you were going to be, but what advice would you give people? Because there's just so many things. You can listen to this webinar, you can listen to that webinar. Even in a pandemic world where we're not going places, there's a lot of FOMO going on. So maybe you could help us out and think about that. And we'll start with you,
It's a good
Towson.
question. I mean, if I look back at CBS, I'd say the course with Professor Canella, credit markets and LBO. I mean, she was really terrific professor, and great class. I actually became the TA for that class, and there was a lot of model-focused work. Obviously, also in your class as well, M&A. And so I think taking classes that have kind of a real analytical focus is helpful. Looking back, honestly, I wish I'd taken maybe more accounting classes. That's certainly very, very relevant.
Tara's going, yes. Okay.
So maybe Tara agrees with me. I took like 2, but maybe I should have taken like 4 or 5. I think so. Those 2 things in particular. Breaking into Wall Street, honestly, or training the street. If you guys have time and want to do a little kind of work on the side, just some model practice maybe, or as part of classes, that really I think is helpful. And then also, for me, again, I did a generalist program and then found myself in the sector I really like. I mean, CBS obviously has a terrific energy club. And so I think taking some classes that are kind of specific to the sector can be a helpful thing as well. But yeah, I think CBS really prepared me very well. And obviously there are a great many CBS students now, across the sector. And so it's kind of fun to run into them really on kind of a regular basis.
Excellent. Graham, how about you?
Hit the wrong button there for a second. I think what I did at CBS is just the proximity to New York and understanding how to speak to somebody on terms that they kind of understand, that you kind of get what an investment bank does, being able to in that regard. There was a few kind of I'd say just transitioning from the military, you're really shifting a mindset. One maybe more people and leadership oriented to something more like analytically driven. And again, you just kind of have to meet with people and just kind of learn the lingo and see how they're thinking about things. The next thing I'll say is just taking, the accounting.
Hey, you know what, Graham? If you turn off your video, you
corporate
might be
finance
better.
classes are. Oh, really? Am I?
Yeah, because your internet's a little spotty, and so we're catching every other word. So you might be able to get a little
Hey.
bandwidth better. There you go. Sounds much better now. Try it now. Without the video.
Sorry about that. Let me.
It's okay.
Yeah,
No,
I
it
have the
sounds better
Wi-Fi off
without your.
too.
Yeah,
Oh,
without
okay.
your
You got me
video,
now?
that's good. Yeah, much better.
Okay. Sorry about that. Where was I then? Did you not hear any of it?
No, we did hear. We heard about going to meet people actually on Wall Street and hearing the lingo and
Yeah.
sort of being with people so you get the sense of what it is that they do.
The last thing is, I think the training the street, like weekend courses, are kind of the best for building just a technical skill set. The technical skills I'm referring to being like navigating Excel and kind of best practices with just with laying out the math. Because once you kind of understand how to think through the concepts, and you can kind of, and you have a tool set to use, you can kind of apply it in ways you kind of explore more about the world of finance. So all those kind of being the proximity to New York, being able to meet with people in the lingo and in the technical kind of classes were essential to my transition.
Excellent. And how about you, Tara?
I would definitely agree with the extra accounting. I don't know what it is, but like just having that drilled into your mind, because I don't want to say all you do, but a lot of what you do is looking at financial statements, building models, Excel models, and we can teach you everything. I'd rather you have a great attitude and a willingness to learn than have all the answers. But I will say I kind of do wish I had taken one or two more accounting courses. As boring as that is, I think it's incredibly helpful and useful.
Okay. My second question will be this. How do you now, so, the students obviously have to network and we're trying the best we can by having these webinars and stuff and introducing them to people. And this semester in M&A, I have a speaker, pretty much I have a speaker almost every class to help do that. How do you guys, because you have to still deal with your clients and stuff, how do you network in a pandemic? Any thoughts on networking in a pandemic? Tips you can share? We'll start with Tara and we'll go Tara, Graham, and then Towson. Just any tips for networking in a pandemic?
I don't know that there is a rule of what you should do or shouldn't do. I think you should just continue to email, call, set up WebExes, as awkward as they are to do these over video. Like, I think everybody is trying to figure out what works best, and there is no right answer. So I would just encourage you to continue the emailing and the calling, setting up calls or setting up these, virtual coffee chats, which neither party has a coffee, but you get the idea. That's what I would encourage, because there's no right answer. You just got to keep going, got to keep trying, got to keep talking to people. And that would be my recommendation.
Okay, Graham, what do you got?
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. Everyone's kind of home alone for the majority of their time in kind of a unique way. So I think the phone calls are actually a nice break to to the monotony of just staring at a screen. And the one thing I'll say about my recruiting process that I built what I felt like were real relationships going through my networking process. I think you can still do the same, through phone calls and kind of video chats and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, this is, you're at a kind of an essential, point in time where I think building these relationships are important, either for, the next step career-wise or just what opportunities might be down the road in 10 years. But I think, the same eagerness and willingness to meet people and build relationships still exists. It's just kind of being found through a different, different avenue.
Okay, Towson, how about you?
Well, I think I agree. I agree with what Tara and Graham said. I don't know if I have too much more to add. Just that I think we're all making a concerted effort to have calls and to get to know people during this process. I think actually we have some. It's kind of unfortunate. The dinners were kind of a fun event that banks did before this year, but I think we do have WebEx, wine, WebEx wine tastings or things like that. I think banks are organizing, which will be kind of a fun thing for people to do. So.
Okay, I lied. I have 3 more questions. Three quick questions. One of the things I think of when I think of you guys is a resume hook. So, for example, when I graduated in 1990. It was a horrible market. In fact, I was the only person hired at First Boston that wasn't a summer associate there. And so, but I had a hook because everybody wanted to talk to the woman who worked at Skadden Arps. I was, I left as a mid-level associate at Skadden, and I got an MBA. And I can see that each one of you would have a hook. I mean, Graham, was your military experience? Maybe we can think about that, the kind of like the hook that you highlighted, and everyone wanted to talk to the Marine, or how'd that go for you?
Yeah, I think that was absolutely it. I can say my mentor at the bank today interviewed me, and I don't think I actually said anything in the interview. So he just was kind of talking about his view on the military and how positive a contribution he thinks I can make to a team. That worked out well in that regard. But certainly, I think there's enough, as many conversations as we, as I was just suggesting having. I think people want to kind of get a break from kind of the routine of work. And I just had a phone call with a girl who's a student at Wharton, and she's in Austin, Texas today, and I'm visiting my parents in Austin, Texas as well. So we spoke for 15 minutes about Austin and growing up in Austin, all these other things. So I think the hook adds a personal level to the resume, and especially when you're not getting the same personal level of kind of interaction that you'd have in person, that stuff's all the more important. Again, because in this role, you'll be spending a lot of time with people, and beyond a resume, you want to know that you're going to enjoy that time with the people you're working with. So I think the hook kind of triggers that, like, hey, this is someone I would appreciate getting coffees with and long hours in the office, and that those kinds of things.
Tara, any thoughts on the hook? Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah, I still always look at the interest, which
Yes,
is usually
I
like
did
the
too.
last
It's
line.
funny. Yeah.
Like, I mean, everybody comes from different backgrounds.
Right.
I'm certain you can create like a interesting story, but if you have on there some random thing that no one does, like, I don't even know, like just something like I enjoy kayaking. I enjoy running mountains. Like not makeup, but like take some liberty with that. Like I have on there cooking spicy food. Like I love cooking spicy food, and it generates conversations because they ask, what do you mean by that? So I don't know. That just takes it in a different direction that I think adds a level of fun to the interview.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm a paramedic, a New York State paramedic, and so people always talk about that, just even professionally. So I'm not looking for a job, but I do expert witness work, and a lot, and so people will be like, "Oh, you're a paramedic." So it is some kind of, and I don't put it on there for that, but it's a big conversation starter, and we have such a great, amazingly talented group of students here at Columbia that you probably wouldn't even think about that. But I too always went to the interest because I don't know if you guys agree. You guys do recruiting, so maybe you can help me with this. Is that once you go to certain schools, you assume the person has a certain quantum of capability, and it's really going to come down to testing that maybe a little bit, but really the fit. And so it gives a way to I mean, you can't really get to know somebody by asking them how to unlever a beta, so if you can really hook into something, then that's kind of helpful. Okay, one last question here, and then I'll close it out here. Is this is sponsored by the private equity program, so I'm wondering if you can talk about how investment banking, whether it's into private equity or something else, does give you a platform to go into other things, whether it's venture, right? We're going to have somebody talk about growth equity in 2 weeks, or if it's private equity writ large, because now you have a vertical experience. Maybe you can chat a little bit about that, and we can start with Towson, and then we'll go to Graham and back to Tara.
Sure. So I actually was in the private equity program, which I remember very fondly, the events and the training. I think, if I look at my experience both at the prior kind of a smaller investment bank and then at B of A, I've seen many of my colleagues actually go to private equity. At the boutique bank, some of them went kind of to a more generalist role. I have seen a handful of my friends maybe go to a kind of an energy focused platform. And I myself, so I think that certainly the investment banking gives you kind of a skill set and a platform, and also relationships, which can kind of enable that to take place. So I do think there's a certain kind of optionality in terms of the training, in terms of everything kind of you build at banking. I think there's also obviously a lot of common skills between the two, and I've also at the same time seen people come from private equity into banking or come back from private equity. One of my best friends on the team did just that, and I think for them, investment banking has just this kind of great deal flow, great team orientation, just constant kind of interaction with clients, which makes it kind of just a very exciting job for the long term. So I do think that, as you said, Donna, that there's intertwined, and we certainly work with private equity, on a constant basis as well.
Okay, good. Graham?
Yeah, I think there's few jobs that kind of give the breadth of exposure to clients and their different capital needs and strategic thought. And investment banking, I think, is it's one of those jobs, like, I guess similar to the military, where it's training for the next thing in many ways, but the next thing doesn't need to be a year and a half later, or after your associate years. We've seen from my team, people leave the team at all ranks, to include our head of Americas left to be the chief investment officer for one of our clients. And I'm just going to go, I guess, through the ranks and just kind of give you examples of how you can leave investment banking at different points in your career. And if private equity is something you're interested in, it just kind of remains open the entire time. So a director that left to be the chief investment officer for Native American gaming tribe with a gaming arm. Another vice president that left to lead the corporate development efforts for the chief investment officer that also left. And then associates and analysts, regularly are leaving for a host of private equity opportunities. I don't think that there's any particular rush out of the job. In fact, I think that this, if I think through my career in terms of maybe 40 years after an MBA, so if I worked up until 70, there's a lot of time to be spent in banking to take that skill set and then apply it elsewhere. And I think the longer you're in this role, the closer you're going to be to the senior decision makers of an organization, and eventually you're just sitting in the boardroom with kind of your peers that you've worked with over decades of experience. So you always take that from an investment banker, is always taking the perspective of how to deploy capital, and I think you'll continue to gain a perspective on that, and can apply it at kind of at any stage in life.
So now we're up to Tara.
Oh, I was just saying, Graham, that would be a great banking career, around 40 years.
Well, that's what I mean. Like 40 years can be, you can retire at 50 and then spend the next 20 in the boardroom or the classroom or teaching. There's a host of things to do, but you can always take that kind of 40 years in investment banking may be unheard of. There might be one or two that have done it, but certainly that's kind of the spectrum of that I'm taking on careers, at least.
No, I think that's very good advice, because everybody has a second act or a third act. This is my third act. I was a lawyer, I was a banker for many years, and now I'm an academic. And now I do EMS. So I mean, life hopefully is a long time, and you can take stuff and leverage it. So Tara, what do you think?
No, I agree with everything that's been said. I think I wouldn't think about banking as like be all end all. You can always go on and do other things. You can stick around and do banking. Like I just think that if you want to go on and do other things, you can. To Donna, your earlier point about women. So we had Lisa get promoted to run the global corporate bank. We had another female. She was great. She was an MD. She got partner at a private equity shop. Like a fantastic opportunity to go now look for investment opportunities. And then we have a number of people that leave throughout the year just naturally, because it's a high turnover business. And they all go to different things. They go to private equity, they go to corporates, they go to other banks, not as much. I would say people usually, if they leave, they transition to do something different, like private equity or corporate development or something. But I think it's a great springboard. Try it. If you like it, stick around. If you want to try something else, do a different act. Option there too.
Yeah. So I'll go through some of the questions here. We got some great questions. And the first one comes about EMBAs. So you guys know about our EMBA program since you're all Columbia MBAs. Can you give any tips for EMBAs? Or EMBAs at a disadvantage? How do people think about EMBAs? Or it's really just, sort of finding your way in there. It doesn't matter if you're an EMBA or an MBA. And I'll just open that up, whoever wants to grab that.
I'm happy to. I've interviewed several, and I think the challenge, just naturally speaking, is that the summer program is used as a funnel for the full-time from a investment banking perspective. Does that mean that you can't get a job in investment banking? No, but that does mean you're going to have to do a little extra legwork, moving around, talking to different banks, seeing where they ended up for the summer. If they didn't have everybody accept their offers, or they decided that the summers that they had, they didn't want to extend offers to. So I do think it's possible. It just requires a little extra legwork. And I think that the benefit that you bring from the EMBA program, you just have, generally speaking, you have a lot more experience and poise and professionalism that you're going to bring to the table that will outshine the analysts who have been directly promoted. They may have the technical skills, but you have the poise and I'll call it like the gravitas to be able to present in the boardroom, which will carry you further into your career, like as you move on. As long as you can learn the technical aspect, your presence, generally speaking, is better because you just have more practice. You've had more practice than the analysts who have been doing analyst work for 2 years.
Great, Tara. Thank you. Anybody else want to tag on to what Tara said? Any other EMBA comments? Okay. So Graham, this question is directed to you. Given your military background, how were you able to demonstrate during the interview process that you did have those technical skills? One with that, because I can relate to this, right? Because I went to Columbia and I had an MBA. I was in Beta Gamma Sigma and all that kind of good stuff. But people still thought of me as a lawyer and were wondering about if I could add. So
Yeah.
what's the deal with this, man? You're getting a lawyer and an MBA, as opposed to, I almost felt better sometimes if I had just been a pure MBA, so did people tag you with that? You're a military guy and now you have to carry that as well? I don't understand. You went to the same MBA program with anybody. Can you talk about that? If that happened to you, and if it did, how you'd overcome that?
I think, there's two parts. One is a very real, you're not technical, you actually have a weakness that you need to address. I think the benefit of I think the military gave me the credibility for people to just know, hey, I'm going to do the work to get to where I need to be. Part of that is just demonstrate, and a lot of that is just building kind of the support network around you, on the job, because so much of this is about just kind of peer-to-peer mentorship, senior to junior mentorship, and that only kind of happens when people believe that the time they spend mentoring you will bear fruit. I think I took the kind of the hardworking attitude that I brought as a Marine just to the workforce, and kind of overcame those hurdles that way. I don't know if I was particularly labeled that in the interview. A few things I did was just I had extra internships during the school year to kind of show I was working on things that were technical. I worked for a VC fund, for example. He funded a business, went through the due diligence process. I was able to speak to deals that I was working on, as opposed to things I was reading in the newspaper. And I thought that may have resonated with people a little more, but it's kind of, I guess it's kind of the, my view on recruiting generally is you need to find a team that you feel comfortable with, that you enjoy the people, because that is ultimately what's going to get you the training and the technical skills that you need to succeed. You can be the smartest person in the room, but if the people around you aren't kind of willing to share things with you, you're not going to learn the things you need to know. And that's really probably the biggest component to this recipe for success.
Excellent. Tara, I saw you making a motion there. Maybe you want to jump on that too?
Yeah, I agree. You need to find people that you gel with, because you'll end up spending, a significant portion of your day in weeks with these people. And if you don't like them, or they don't like you, life's too short. Just find somebody that you enjoy interacting with, enjoy spending time with, because it'll make the biggest difference in the world.
Yeah, we have a question here too, about certifications. Is it worth it to get a CFA or an SIE or any of that kind of, any those things. Are those helpful, not helpful? You look at them, don't look at them?
I find them marginally helpful, but am I going to hire somebody because they're a CFA versus not? No.
Grant, we have another question here for you. This person also came from a leadership background and wanted to ask, from a Marine's perspective, how were you able to translate this idea of your efforts as a Marine into actual deal sourcing? So, okay, we understand the technical part. You'll do it. You'll take that hill and you'll learn how to do the LBO model or whatever. It's not that hard. But what about the sort of the interpersonal interaction and be able to source deals?
Yeah, I think, certainly I can't say I've sourced a deal as an associate just quite yet, but I think the real value is once you learn kind of the baseline knowledge and kind of the lingo, again, as I was saying before, the important part is being able to present to clients and like walk through analyses and walk through, where you are in a process. And I think, having briefed, I don't know how many just mission planning orders to people was, an hour long conversation about what we're about to do. That kind of presentation and presence then is kind of the foundation of which you then take all the things you just spent the last 2 weeks working through on some analysis or a presentation. So that's kind of the, you're at the end state almost. Like you want to, like, presenting is not easy, and a lot of people in this job can actually struggle with it. I think if you're used to doing that, it comes a little easier. However, as my global head will say, when you speak to clients, you actually have to have something to say. So you have to learn, learn the foundational skills first.
I often say that in my class. It's very different. So we had a lot of cover when I started in banking because Bloomberg was not ubiquitous. So if we came with comps and we came with a stock price chart, we were like, oh my God, now a client's like, okay, I don't need you to tell me that. I can just press this button and it appears before me. So you really have to know something now and have sort of an edge as you come in. A question for you guys. How do you think Colombia is evaluated relative to its peer group? I mean, I know that we're all here, here as proud Colombians, but I mean, you guys also do interviewing and run into other MBAs that are colleagues of yours. What do we do well at Colombia, and perhaps what could we do better, such that when we're interviewing from Colombia, we might be able to make sure people are all on board with that? And we'll get Tara or Graham. Towson's got a phone in, I think.
I think our strong suit is, since we're in New York, we're super present just in the office. Like, it's, if you're only coming in, let's say you're up in New Hampshire or some part of Pennsylvania, wherever you are, at other schools. If you're only coming in on Fridays, it's kind of like a bus of MBAs shows up to New York, and then they're plodding around New York City, meeting with the banks. There's kind of a rhythm to that everyone just kind of blends in. Monday through Thursday, though, the people that show up, it's kind of a more personal connection that can be made. It's, the coffee is actually, I needed a coffee break, so I'm glad you're here. So that, I think, is effective. I think the downside, or just the, one part of that, is we actually spend so much time shuffling between offices in New York that we don't maybe spend quite as much in the classroom or behind like the Excel work or in the accounting book. There are a few schools that have like really strong like investment banking programs that learn and drill those technicals. So while you're meeting people, they're maybe just drilling some of the foundational skills. That's kind of how I have navigated the landscape. Ultimately, though, I think the jobs are won through personal relationships. Again, I came back from London after a summer there, realizing I had to completely redo my whole career outlook very quickly. And I was only able to land on my feet at B of A with a good team because of the personal connections I made, coming in Monday through Thursday when, maybe some of the my peers at competing schools, were in their, accounting class or investment banking, coursework. So ultimately, relationships prevail in this business. I think that'll stay consistent for my entire career. And I think that's where we win at CBS. However, I would not overlook maybe that slight weakness we have with, spending more time in the subway than in the classroom.
Yeah, I think that that's true. I've seen that evolve over my time. I mean, I've even seen it, in my own classroom experience. People are more concerned about sort of meeting people than actually learning some of the skills. And unfortunately, you have to know both. You have to know both the skills and the people. Okay, but did anybody else want to share? I think that was a really good observation. Okay. Oh, yes. Here we go, Townsend. We have a question for you. We want to ask about your experience at a boutique, since you can compare and contrast both boutique versus large bank iBanking. Thoughts?
Can you hear me?
We
Okay.
can hear you. Yeah.
Now we can't
could
hear
before,
you,
but now we
Townsend.
can't. We could before you did whatever you just did. Now we can. We can hear you now.
So
Okay.
you're talking into the phone. Do you want me to unmute the phone line?
Yeah. Could you
Okay, let me see if I can do that.
You was sounding fine before.
Yeah, he called in.
Does that work?
Yes.
Yes.
Now we see you.
Great,
fine.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, something. So I was at the boutique bank for 3 years plus a summer internship, and here almost a year and a half. I mean, look, they're both great options, and I think at CBS, it's true. Maybe I think Graham was talking about spending some time on the subway and going around, but I do think historically. And also this year as well, that at CBS, I think you really get to know all the banks very, very well. There's a lot of CBS, graduates at each of these banks. And so I think part of the process and what makes it kind of fun when you recruit is figuring out what's the best fit for you, which I think kind of you kind of figure out as you go through the process. I enjoyed my time at the particular boutique I was at. It was a good fit in many ways. I would say that, as I started to think about, geez, maybe I, want to do this kind of as a long-term career, that for me, a lot of the benefits of going to B of A were building the skill set and the relationships at the breadth of deal experience. I think were kind of essential to be able to become, say, ultimately kind of a senior level banker. And again, I'm not saying, there's so many banks that are kind of great options, but I did see, for instance, looking at kind of the MDs, that they tended to all come from, say, a bulge bracket bank, and then maybe at some point decide to move to a boutique, and that, platform like B of A really kind of drives growth kind of as a kind of a long-term career. And, Tara and Graham have touched on that, but I think some of the elements of that are, for example, working with every product partner across various deals or capital raises. That's something that's kind of unique to kind of a few platforms like B of A. The breadth of deal experience I've touched upon. Also something that's actually been, I think, surprised me a little bit, but which I think has been common to all three of us and really all of our colleagues, is just how much kind of experience and deal responsibility that they give to you. I came over as a third-year associate, and within a month, they had me running a sell side and developing kind of real expertise in this particular area. It's not the most glamorous area of the sector, it's wastewater, but it was, I will say, it was a great experience. So I think in just a lot of respects, it's kind of a great platform for kind of long-term growth.
Okay, great. So I'm going to wrap it up with one other question from our panelists, and then I'll give you a parting thought if you could just want to say things that, so if you want to give some folks some advice. But my a last question here is from a panelist. It's from Marina, and Marina asks, if we don't end up getting a summer internship, right, for whatever reasons, and I think, Graham, you touched on this, what are some other things that people look at that can sort of give you some more bona fides? So if we don't have the traditional summer internship at B of A or Goldman or somewhere else or at a private equity firm, is it worth it to take these, sort of unpaid internships that the school has, or how do you think about those? And I'll open that up to any of you.
I can take that since I took the opportunity while in school to have a variety of internships. I guess there are two. One was an unpaid with the VC fund, and then the other was with the was a paid internship, but with the company we funded. I think it really depends on where you're coming from, but I think the more experience and kind of storylines that you can tie into what the investment bankers do, the more credible and relatable your experiences are. Obviously, I think the internship's important. It kind of gives insight into the culture of investment banking, which shouldn't be overlooked. But we've hired people that have come from a variety of backgrounds, beyond the summer internship route. But I think it's just crafting that story. Again, the personal relationships matter in that regard, because you really need to know people to grab the coffee chat and share why you make sense. But I think in that regard, you need, as the same thing I said about the clients, you have to have something to say. You have to have something to say to your to the banks when you come to intern to look for a full-time role. And the first part, though, is having someone to say it to, which is a relationship.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I think we've cleaned up all the questions here in the chat, and there were some great questions. And you guys had some great thoughts. So I'm just going to spend a moment. I'll give sort of students my advice, and then I'd like you to each give a piece of advice. And so one piece of advice that I would give students is I think that we focus a lot on finding the Graham or finding the Tara or finding the Towson. I think an oftentimes overlooked resource is the faculty, especially our adjunct faculty or our practice faculty. Many of them have spent long careers on the street, and as you can see here, all three of these people took my M&A class. So it's and whether or not I remember them specifically or don't specifically, I do remember these folks specifically. But you could say, hey Donna, here's a CBS alum, they graduated in such and such. Do you know them? And it's a lot better if I could send Tara an email on your behalf and say, hey Tara, there's this person in my M&A class, they really are interested in consumer. Would you have a few minutes to, is it okay if I give out your email, or would, look out for their email, they're going to email you. Some kind of more of a warm introduction. So there's lots of practice faculty at Columbia ranging in all of the different subject areas. So I would really encourage you to try to get some relationships with them. And my only other thing I would say on that is, I get a lot of blind inquiries, like people I don't know asking me for favors, and I will do it, but I it's easy to do a favor for somebody who's in my class or has written me before and said, could we have coffee, or can I Zoom with you? So just think about that too, because everybody's kind of busy, and if you were able to sort of say, hey, I was in your class, or I really want to take your some kind of connection with that professor rather than just kind of a random email. So A, practice faculty have a lot of contacts. B, try to have a warm inquiry to the practice faculty before you just sort of email them. That would be my thoughts. You guys have you have a minute each to sort of summarize the advice you'd give to your 2020 self sitting at Columbia Business School? Graham, we can start with you since you're on my screen, and then we'll go to Towson and then clean it out with Tara.
Yeah, I think that's between the faculty, I think the executives and residents, I think the resources at the school are just kind of endless. Even if you took Columbia and just put it on its own planet, you should be extremely focused on the people around you there, because you're going to learn a ton. Your classmates, again, professors, executives, and residents. I think the you need to come to these conversations prepared with something, I guess, relevant to ask and show and demonstrate an interest in that particular person's area of expertise. The first part, and I think we were kind of alluding to it before, is balancing the time on the subway with time in the classroom, maybe better than the whole of the population does, because the teachers know and the professors know, if the who in their class cares, and the people that care in the classroom actually are more likely to also care on the job, at least from the professor's perspective. They can more credibly vouch for that to a particular employee or employer or professional in the field. So I think just demonstrating an interest in what anyone's field of interest is kind of essential, especially getting good advice.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, especially because I don't really believe much in the compartmentalization myself. Like you're really not paying attention in class, but you're a really fabulous person outside the classroom. So that's kind of a hard. No, you might be, but that's kind of a hard pitch to make. So
at least, yeah, and you wouldn't want to bridge that with the person you've already convinced you're not kind of focused in front of. I think certainly I'm not attentive to everyone I've met with, but certainly I know who I am with. I made good impressions and I leverage those.
Oh, you did? Because when we got
So
all of you guys on here, I was like, I know all these guys. As soon as I saw your faces, I remember where you sat in class. I remember, so,
well, I had a lot of questions to ask, so that was, it's just I had a lot to learn in your class, and I'm glad I followed up afterwards as well. Those kind of points that probably everyone got a little more quickly than I did.
no problem. Okay, Towson, we're going to go with you.
Sure. So I think, so I agree with everything Graham said. I think, a key point to add is probably thinking about the second year students who are going to these different banks. They not only have a great perspective on the banks, but can also help kind of put you in touch with people there. So that's something to think about, for the kind of the older, the second year. And then I would echo, I think that, when everybody kind of talks to people coming from CBS, people who are engaged on campus, who are clearly kind of like engaged in their classes and out of classes and making the most of it, and focusing, say, on the sectors that they're interested in, it really comes across as very positive and kind of a great kind of way to discuss that, have a conversation, and go from there. And I'll say, this one funny story, Donna, when you're talking about, thinking about prioritizing school versus, say, recruiting, and people doing both. I still remember, so this was back in 2014, for midterms, one of my classmates had misscheduled his informational during his stats midterm exam. It was supposed to be like 3 hours. He finished his exam in 30 minutes, handed it in, and ran out to make his information. I still remember, wow, that guy's incredibly smart, and we all realized he had. So it is always funny watching people kind of manage both of those. But it's great to kind of be here with everybody, and look forward to meeting more of you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Towson. Okay, and we'll end it with Tara.
Now, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for the time. And as you network and make your way into your next step in your career, whether your second year is looking for full time or your first year is looking for a summer internship, I would say I would echo everything that Graham and Towson already said. Try to make those relationships. I would have a very succinct story of why you. Just keep in mind, bankers have very short attention spans, very short. So get it in 30 seconds or less and have a personable story related to it and draw them in. Make them want to talk to you, right? Have some type of hook, which usually has a very good story element to it. Also keep in mind, bankers are professional salespeople, right? We love a good story. That's all we do.
Yes,
We tell stories.
Yes, and we sell you on the firm too, so you really want to get an objective view on stuff as well. So, and that's another great thing about Columbia. We've got a lot of people who actually work at the places too. So I know, Sherry, you're on the phone. Did you want to say anything, Sherry? Or Sherry was?
Invite her to, let me invite her to speak.
If you want to say anything, yeah, if you would like to say anything, Sherry, because we're really grateful. We have one more, as Greta's noticing, on December the 4th, and we'll send out an email for that. But I didn't know if Sherry wanted to make any comments, because Sherry and her team have been incredibly helpful in stepping up and thinking about this program with us, being kind enough to even think about it, and then to make it into a reality. So, by finding fabulous speakers and working with us to get it all together. So, Sherry, did you want to say anything, or?
Yeah, hi. Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Hi. Thank you so much. And this session was so great. Loved it. Thanks for hosting, Donna. And yeah, so next session, we will have Greg Nabhan, the Global Vice Chairman of Global Capital Markets, to talk about the next topic with us, and I'm so excited to have him on. And I heard the last event went really well as well, and I'm so happy, that these events are going well. And always happy to answer any students' questions about investment banking in general, or recruitment with IB, or Bank of America specific questions. Always happy to talk. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And yeah, thank you, Donna and Greta, for organizing. And thank you, Towson, Tara, and Graham for being on.
Yeah, that was great. It was really amazing. So thank you all. Have a great rest of the day. Please stay safe. Thank you, Greta, for being the co-host with the most, as always. And we'll look forward to seeing you around campus or in Zoom, wherever we come in contact. And thank you again. This is really great for all of our panels to take the time out of their busy day. So thanks to all. Stay safe. And if we don't see you before Thanksgiving holiday, have a wonderful, safe Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.